This is an ODB Films production. Visit odbfilms.com today.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. This is the show that's all about growing in our understanding and practice of faith. Past episodes are available wherever you like to listen to podcasts. I'm Doug Tuke, the Vice President of Ministry Advancement at ODB Films, and today we look at one of my favorites of all time, G.K. Chesterton. Some of you have been wanting this show for like a crazy long time. We did a show on distributism, which was great. We talked about Chesterton, but nothing like this. It is as exhaustive as we can be to tell you the story of this amazing dude. Gilbert Keith Chesterton. That's right, that's the one. He's an English writer of the 20th century. He was known as the Prince of Paradox because he communicated his kind of conservative, often sort of countercultural ideas in a pretty offhanded, whimsical prose with all kinds of creations. Like, for example, here's one of his famous quotes. Thieves respect property. They merely wish the property to become their property that they may more perfectly respect it. That's very Chesterton-esque. So a lot of his works remain in print, which you should read, and we'll talk a lot about that on this show, including all kinds of collections of his Father Brown detective stories. We'll talk about that later. And then Ignatius Press it has put together this like monumental, complete works, and we'll talk about that in a bit too. He was born in Campden Hill, Kensington, London, was educated at St. Paul's School, and then later went to the Slade School of Art in order to become an illustrator, let the art come forth. In 1900, Chesterton was asked to write a few magazine articles on art criticism, which sparked his interest in writing. So he went on to become one of the most prolific writers of all time. Just wait till you hear about all the things he's written. It's unbelievable. So his writings, they show this kind of wit, a sense of humor, and it's kind of unusual even today. Like there's kind of Dave Barry-esque, if you know Dave Barry, only with, I would say, a lot more intellectual depth. But he's also making like super serious comments on the world, government, politics, economics, philosophy, theology, and then a lot of other topics, which is pretty cool. He wrote around 80 books, several hundred poems, 200 short stories, 4,000 essays, and a few plays. He was a columnist for the Daily News, Illustrated London News, and then his own paper later on, GK's Weekly. In the U.S., his writings on distributism, like we talked about before, we did a Renovo on that, were really popularized through the American Review, which was published by Seward Collins in New York. He was a literary, social critic, historian, playwright, novelist, Catholic Christian theologian, apologist, debater, mystery writer. This guy's amazing. His most well-known character, like we mentioned, is the priest detective Father Brown. That's pretty famous. A lot of people have heard about him, his stories. There's been television renditions of that too. The Father Brown character appeared only in short stories, while his novel, The Man Who Was Thursday, is probably his greatest creation. He converted to Roman Catholicism in 1922, although Christian themes and a lot of symbolism appear in a lot of his writing, and he often presented himself in the role of kind of the church's defender, their champion, which is kind of cool. The British writer Hilaire Belloc, who you should check out also, is often associated with his friend Chesterton a lot. Although they were totally different people, they had in common their Catholic faith and a really critical attitude towards capitalism and socialism. They're both figures that will probably outlast a lot of their kind of celebrated literary contemporaries just because there was so much depth to what they were writing about. Chesterton was a big guy. I mean, a really big guy, 6'4", weighing around 295 pounds. The big man. Think like Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, he's just a big dude. He had a really unique look, usually wearing like a cape, a crumpled hat with a sword stick in his hand, usually a cigar hanging out of his mouth. I love it. Rarely did the guy remember where he was supposed to be going, and he would miss the train like all the time that was supposed to take him wherever he was going. Just typical intellect, like the kind of intellect that puts on more than one watch because they just aren't thinking about daily tasks. They're always so buried in their brain. And it wasn't actually uncommon for Chesterton to send a telegram to his wife, Frances Blogg, whom he married in 1901, from some distant and incorrect location. And he would write things in the telegram like, am I at Market Harbor? Like, where should I be? And then she would always write back, home. Like, come home. Because he would get so lost in himself, just a riot. So it's such an intellect. He loved to debate, often publicly. He debated with friends like George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell, famous author of Why I'm Not a Christian, Clarence Darrow. Chesterton was usually considered the winner. I mean, just a super brilliant strategist. According to his autobiography, he and George Bernard Shaw played cowboys in a silent movie that was never released. Wouldn't that have been funny to watch? Other fun facts, Chesterton, the Everlasting Man, you really should read that, unbelievable, contributed to a young atheist named C.S. Lewis being converted to Christianity. You should look that up. C.S. Lewis has a really beautiful quote about crediting G.K. Chesterton with articulating the foundations of Christianity, which he then fell in love with. How cool is that? Chesterton's biography of Charles Dickens was largely responsible for creating a popular revival for Dickens' work, as well as a really serious reconsideration of Dickens by a lot of scholars, considered by T.S. Eliot, Peter Ackroyd, and others to be the best book on Dickens ever written. What a mind. His book, Orthodoxy, which you should definitely read, has become an absolute religious classic. An essay that Chesterton wrote for the Illustrated London News inspired Mohandas Gandhi to lead the movement to end British colonial rule in India, as spoken about by Gandhi. Isn't that amazing? Chesterton's novel, The Napoleon of Notting Hill, inspired Michael Collins, famous Irish rebel, to lead a movement for Irish independence. The same book inspired George Orwell for writing his 1984. Both acknowledged by them. Michael Collins and George Orwell said it was Chesterton's writings that really stimulated X, Y, and Z. Amazing stuff. Chesterton matured in kind of an increasingly sort of self-absorbed, shrill, cynical culture. He was really transformed from sort of a nominal agnostic to a really thoughtful, devout Catholic. And really, perhaps G.K. Chesterton's greatest gift was his ability to see and to just think super clearly in the spirit of C.S. Lewis, in the spirit of Tolkien, where very complicated ideas can be laid out simply and clearly. And when you get into his books, and we'll talk about that in a second, page after page, it's just profound wisdom born of kind of a uncanny common sense that just jumps out at you, and reading it is worth the effort, although sometimes it is hard to really dig in to his writing. So how do you read Chesterton? And there's a great quote. I can't remember if it was William Buckley or Richard Niehaus who said it, but he marveled that when he was reading Chesterton, he could only take in a few paragraphs before he would need to stand up and walk away. I have had that same experience where I just sort of read a little bit at a time, and then I think about it a lot. Like, oh my gosh, that was so profound. Or how does that impact ministry and me personally, spiritually, all those things. He did it only if to just kind of digest Buckley or Niehaus, I can't remember who said that, to sort of consider and reconsider all these different layers that were found in the writing. And I'm not trying to confuse you. It's not like reading James Joyce, which is really hard to do. But I mean, like, there's a ton of depth to Chesterton, and you don't want to lose it. So you got to just take it a little bit, just a couple of things. Here's some quotes. This is what I mean. Here, Chesterton says, "The Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried." That's a very popular one. You might have read that before. Here's another one. "Men do not differ much about what things they will call evils. They differ enormously about what evils they will call excusable." Great line. Have that conversation over cigars and beer. And here's another one. "Fallacies do not cease to be fallacies because they become fashions." You see that one a lot today. A lot of Twitter excitement about that statement today. Here's another one. "These are the days when the Christian is expected to praise every creed except his own." Another one. "There are only two kinds of people, those who accept dogmas and know it, and those who accept dogmas and don't know it." That's a great line. We could do a show on like every one of those lines. Second, you got to read the biography of Chesterton. And the best one, and there's a lot of them written about G.K. Chesterton, but none can even touch the one written by his best friend and publisher, Macy Ward. Gilbert Keith Chesterton is what it's called, achieves what kind of all biographies aspire to. It's a super warm, very personal recollection, just tons of anecdotes, steeped in Chesterton's own words. The author Ward, there's a famous kind of Catholic couple, the publishing firm called Sheed and Ward. That's who made the book. Brought the world all kinds of authors, but this is really their Christopher Dawson, Ronald Knox, Jacques Maritain, Hilaire Belloc, who we mentioned before, Evelyn Waugh. They were all in there, and Ward really just puts them all into context, which is no small feat. Just thinking about the millions of words and countless insights that Chesterton wrote about, but the biography is so good. Also, don't forget, if you're reading Chesterton, dig into the essays. most of which can be found free online, but also in that Ignatius collection that we talked about before. So an essay that spoke a lot to me during my sort of young adult rediscovery of Catholicism was Chesterton's Why I Am a Catholic. You can find that for free online. And in the essay, just this essay alone, the number of insights that just absolutely upended my stubbornness towards Catholicism was stunning and forced me to do a lot of thinking. Other favorites of mine include The Drift from Domesticity, On Running After One's Hat, and The Diabolist. These are also good. Chesterton's essays are amazing. They concentrate his, just larger than life, this kind of boisterous, wide-ranging mind without limiting his wisdom. So he's saying a lot in a little, which is the power of a great essay anyway. And most of them can be found by the thousands in the Illustrated London News, which is part of Ignatius Press's collected works of G.K. Chesterton, or in this marvelous sort of recent collection by Ignatius Press called In Defense of Sanity. That's a great collection. Go try to find it. Fourth, spend time with people who love Chesterton. So the American Chesterton Society, which is literally chesterton.org, is a super engaging group of admirers. They gather routinely to kind of just mull through the words and the wisdom of Chesterton. Counted among its members are a lot of people and a lot of really brilliant intellects, men, women, religious, college professors, priests, actors, writers, world champion whistlers. I know, look it up. It's a vibrant organization, and it was my first real introduction to sort of the wonders of Chesterton, sort of the depth, the people that he's reached, both believers and non-believers, by the way. But it is fun to see leading religious minds that are really steeped in that organization. It's just worth kind of checking out. Amazing stuff. So Dale Ahlquist is this sort of brilliant, the playful leader of this group, and he's worked a lot of wonders to bring G.K. Chesterton to a whole new generation, and we are all indebted to that. We'll talk a little bit more about this kind of like possible sainthood for G.K. in just a second, and Ahlquist is the one that really led that. The ACS, the American Chesterton Society, their Gilbert magazine, Seton Hall has the Chesterton Review, Joseph Pierce's St. Austin Review, and really anything that Father James Shaw writes about Chesterton just should not be ignored because it's so, so good. And then finally, grab a good book. Get one of the big Chesterton novels. Dig into the writing. My favorite ones, if I have to limit it, definitely Orthodoxy. That was a huge deal for me. Heretics is a great one. What's Wrong with the World? Of course, the Father Brown Mysteries, which are a great introduction just to the wit of his mind. The Man Who Was Thursday, so good. The Catholic Church and Conversion, very, very good. And The Thing. But remember, when reading Chesterton's books, apply my first recommendation. Take him in small doses. Don't just try to like digest it on a vacation read. You know what I mean? Like just small dose. Take in the quips, take in the one-liners, the characterization, all that other stuff, and then read them again and again. Because if you struggle with his writing, keep going, and then kind of reapproach him another time. But don't give up. To paraphrase a really wise person, when you're reading Chesterton, Chesterton's not on trial. You are. You're not trying to judge him. Just sort of let his writing kind of give framework to your own personality and your own spirituality, because he's operating at such a deep and a heavy thinking level, which I think is one of the reasons why he's not as popular as maybe he ought to be with some Catholic thinkers, because I think he gives you homework. He makes you work to really get to know him. So there you have it. It's 5 tips on how to read Chesterton, and I hope you find him really helpful. As for me, my affection for the guy, man, I don't know if there's any boundaries there. He really changed my life. Humorous, holy, full of mirth, just kind of measured, boyish. He's brilliant, kind of childish, but brilliant. So wise. He just epitomized a lot of joy that's found in eternal truth. And that truth for him is the Catholic faith. I mean, Chesterton found the Catholic Church, and he really helped me rediscover it as well. So read him very gratefully. Interestingly enough, regarding the Catholic Church and sainthood, Dale Ahlquist, who we mentioned, but the American Chesterton Society and the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton, in December 2018 published Night of the Holy Ghost, which explored Chesterton's life and writings and responds to arguments from those who say he was too fat, drank too much, smoked too much, harbored anti-Semitic sentiments. So Ahlquist really names all these things. In 2013, Bishop Peter Doyle of Northampton ordered that an initial investigation into the possibility of Chesterton's sainthood should be opened, and then tapped Canon John Udris for the task. And Udris completed his preliminary investigation in the summer of 2018 and then filed his final report with Doyle. So according to Ahlquist, ACS Pres, the next step would be for Doyle to approach the Vatican's Congregation for the Cause of Saints for a nil obstat for his writing, a declaration that nothing stands in the way, basically, and of the cause going forward. So once that happens, a petitioner, meaning the one who formally asks for the cause to be opened, will be named and selects a postulator in charge of carrying the cause forward. We talked about this in our Renovo about saints. If you want to know more about kind of how to become, what the actual formal process of becoming a saint is, you check out that episode. Ahlquist says he doesn't know whether any of these steps have been taken yet. No one really does, kind of Vatican stuff. But Ahlquist has said repeatedly that he hopes there'll be kind of a fresh movement really soon, and that the Society of G.K. Chesterton would be chosen as the petitioner, as they're passionate about telling a story. However, while this famed author, he might not really fit the bill of a pious saint of the past who, has prayed their way into heaven in monasteries and convents, you got to remember that Chesterton really exhibited heroic humility. And Ahlquist talks about this a ton. And according to him, Ahlquist that is, Chesterton was, quote, a great genius who really had the ability to annihilate his opponents if he wanted to, but he always treated them with charity. It makes me think, we did a show on him too, on Jerome Lejeune, the father of modern genetics, defender of life, who was just brilliant, but would argue, would debate publicly and defend life, but in a pastoral, almost like razor-like academic way. I love that. That's a higher level of intellect than just barking and screaming and yelling and not really understanding the art and the craftsmanship of debate. So one of the main intentions people ask Chesterton's intercession for is fertility. Isn't that interesting? So Ahlquist talks about that. He notes that Chesterton and his wife Frances were unable to have children, and other people have asked for healing. He said, noting that, Ahlquist said this, noting that there have already been potential cases of healings brought forward that could be presented as potential miracles later in the sainthood process. So there's some spiritual activity going on here with Chesterton in heaven. How about that? So the main stumbling blocks that Ahlquist talks about are accusations of anti-Semitism and a lack of temperance. Because, quite frankly, Chesterton was a big guy. He smoked and he drank a lot. And he died after the Nazi Party had already risen to power in Germany, but before the Holocaust. And it's interesting. Ahlquist says, calling Chesterton anti-Semitic is tragic. It's a tragic portrayal because it's simply not true. He insists that despite Chesterton's size, he was actually no glutton. He said that most accounts of Chesterton's life suggest that he ate a little bit, didn't eat that all, meaning like he had like a glandular condition that caused him to gain a lot of weight, which led to his size, the look and the feel of his body. That's interesting. It's amazing how we just judge by the look, but not by the actual personal spirituality. Read your G.K. Chesterton. Stumble into all the free stuff that you can find online. Dig into the brilliant commentary that he provides us as believers. And I'm telling you right now, those of you that are lean more towards the academic side of your faith, he will flip you upside down. Go read Orthodoxy. He will flip you upside down. He will give you, he is presenting language that you could apply right now to kind of your geopolitical reality and just shake your head going, oh my gosh. There's a layer of wisdom to his wit that truly, truly is needed in the heart of all believers, who many of us knee-jerk react to policy and ideology that we do not like. Chesterton would just fly in the face of that. Where is your temperance? Where is your wisdom? Taking into account perspective, but then arguing from a perspective of truth, specifically Christocentric truth, long-standing dogmatic tradition, and being able to stand firmly on that foundation as opposed to sort of swaying in the wind of ecclesiology. He is brilliant in that light and well worth your time. Push yourself to dig into his writings and appreciate G.K. Chesterton, who hopefully, pray for us, G.K. I hope that you are well on the path to canonization. I think that would be amazing. Thanks a lot for listening. Sincerely, we're partners in the journey of faith. I hope you will share the Renovo podcast with friends and foes Send your topic suggestions, questions, and or comments to doug@odbfilms.com. Always remember to engage the tradition and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.